thank you everybody for joining today's workshop on funding cyber research. As you can see, we have representatives from a number of very well-known organizations with experience on this type of research funding. So before we begin, just to provide some procedural remarks, this is a workshop, which means it's a slightly different format to some of the presentations and panels you might have took part in during the week. In terms of the flow of the workshop, we are going to start with 2 presentations by our experts, followed by some time for everybody to join a group discussion. And then we will move to a second set of presentations, which will again be followed by Q&A and discussion for everybody. So as you can see, the idea, the purpose of this session is to facilitate discussion, and we hope it will be as interactive as possible. So please do get involved in the conversation. Please also feel free, like the other panels this week, to pose questions in the chat function, which we will be looking at throughout the remarks, or send a note that you would like to ask your question live, and Natalie will help to unmute you. So again, this is a workshop rather than a panel, so get involved. Another 1 or 2 notes for your attention. The discussion is being broadcast on livecast. And please also feel free to tweet on #closingthegap. If speakers have additional information or slides, they will be posted on the website. So again, take a look. And that brings me then to the workshop itself. So to begin, and just to give a sense of framing, the purpose of this morning's conversation is to give you, as participants, insights into different mechanisms for obtaining funding in support of cooperation and research projects that are focused on cyber and digital issues. Our expert speakers each play important roles in funding cutting-edge research and policy initiatives on these topics, and we hope that you will benefit from this conversation today. Examples, to give you just a sense of where we're going, some very brief examples of the types of issues that our speakers will be considering include: what are the main funding avenues within their respective organizations? What type of initiatives do they support? What makes a good grant application? What are their thoughts on the state of cooperation and research? And what is the impact of these types of projects? So with that, enough from me. I'm going to move across to our first presentation, which is by Eva Junyent, who is based at the European Commission with the Service for Foreign Policy Instruments. So Eva, I hope you can unmute yourself when you're ready.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, because I kept getting this message that the host was muting me. I hope you can all hear me now. So thank you, Caitriona, and thank you to Patrick and to the EUISS for organizing this conference and for inviting me to participate in this session. I will introduce today the European Union's objectives for digital cooperation with partner countries and the mechanisms we have to support this cooperation. On this last point, I will refer to the Union's multi-annual financial framework for the 2021-2027 period. This is the EU 7-year budget, still in negotiation with our member states today as we speak. Digital, along with our response to climate change, is a top priority for the European Commission of President von der Leyen. The European Commission Union is working on a digital transformation that will benefit everyone, digital solutions that put people first and open up new opportunities for businesses, boost the development of trustworthy technology, foster an open and democratic society, enable a vibrant and sustainable economy, and help fight climate change and achieve the green transition. The European Union intends to lead the transition to a healthy planet and a human-centric digital world. We will work internally and globally in cooperation with partners. The European model has proved to be an inspiration for many partners around the world as they seek to address policy challenges, and this should be no different when it comes to digital. We're therefore committed to share the European model for an open global digital economy and society vested in European and internationally recognized values. We're committed to support developing economies in going digital and to work with partners around the world through a multi-stakeholder approach to find common approaches with a view to developing international norms and standards. Digitalization goes hand in hand with cybersecurity. The more institutions and society become reliant on digital technologies, the more important the role cybersecurity plays. A more digitalized society requires building a resilient cyberspace that is fully compliant with human rights and the rule of law, as well as well as with the whole of society approach. So, in an ever more complex global context, the EU international cooperation is evolving to share our model and work with our partners to achieve these objectives and to respond in an effective and comprehensive manner to digital transition challenges. For the next period, 2021-2027, the EU will leverage regulatory power, economic and technological capabilities, diplomatic relations, and the external action financial tools at our disposal. And as mentioned yesterday, as we speak here today, the EU member states are negotiating the Union's budget for the next 7 years. And the proposal that this includes with important structural changes to the EU external action in order to make it simpler and more flexible, and to enable the EU to engage more strategically with our partner countries in the future. This proposal envisages merging the majority of the current external financing instrument into a single one, the so-called Neighborhood Development and International Cooperation Instrument, NDICI, as well as integrating into this instrument the biggest EU external financial fund until now, the European Development Fund, that it's currently outside the budget and will come into this new NDICI instrument. Um, with these changes, the EU strives to take into account, among other things, the need to align its actions into its internal strategies and its international commitments, and to make EU added value, relevance, and credibility more visible. The objective of this proposed NDICI instrument, with a budget of almost 90 billion euros for the next 7 years, is to uphold and promote the Union's values and interests worldwide. NDICI is a broad instrument that consists of three pillars: a geographic pillar, a thematic pillar, and a rapid response pillar. The geographic pillar, with the bulk of the financing, around 68 billion euros, wants to foster dialogue and cooperation with third countries. It will address challenges such as human development, including gender equality, climate change, migration, and digital. The thematic pillar will support human rights and democracy, civil society, stability, and peace. And it will complement the geographic pillar in as much as these issues have to be addressed at global level, as well as other challenges that would not be covered by the geographic pillar. This pillar includes a envelope of approximately 7 billion euros. And the third one, the rapid response pillar, with approximately 4 billion euros, again, this is all still in negotiation, will allow the EU to swiftly respond to crisis, as well as to support conflict prevention, strengthen the resilience of states, societies, communities, and individuals. It will also allow the linking of humanitarian aid and development action, as well as early action to address other foreign policy objectives. So there's no specific envelope for digital or cyber cooperation or any other domain, But as mentioned before, cooperation in the digital domain, including cyber, is one of the 5 thematic priorities identified by the EU for our external action the next 7 years, actually internal and external action. Support for international digital and cyber cooperation can be funded by any of these pillars. What actions can we fund? Digital cooperation initiatives will be designed based on 4 priority areas using a mix of budget support, technical assistance, innovative instruments such as blending and guarantees, and call for proposals. The 4 areas of work are support to governance, policy regulatory frameworks, standards and data protection, and the promotion of a human-centric approach. This mainly supporting policy dialogues at government level, but also with other actors that can participate and support these reforms. Second area is digital connectivity. And 2 other areas that will be even more fundamental in the post-COVID scenario. This is the support to building skills, support to entrepreneurship and digital economy, and the mainstreaming of digitalization across focal sectors and the development of e-services, in particular e-health and e-education, will be fostered. How will the EU foster a coordinated approach on international partnerships? We want to act at global level with actions that concentrate on promoting open, secure, neutral, transparent, inclusive, and safe use of digital technologies, inspired by the principles in our digital single market strategy, as well as in the international human rights frameworks. At regional level, EU cooperation aims to support regional connectivity and markets through the development and harmonization of the regional policy and regulatory framework through technical assistance, grants, and the development of regional infrastructures, applying financial instruments such as blending and guarantees. At national level, interventions have to be tailored according to the e-readiness of the partner country and its willingness to endorse the human-centric approach. The EU could collaborate with countries with an advanced and human-centric digital sector that could play the role of champions for regional infrastructures and policy reforms. In countries at at more initial phases of implementation of digital technologies, the EU could focus on promoting jobs and growth, competitiveness, and diversification. In countries with significant digital divides, the EU should promote the basics of digital transformation, such as connectivity, inclusiveness, and digital literacy. So, again, a mix of instruments or of modalities to implement and achieve the objectives that the EU has for our external action and our cooperation on digital and cyber. For implementation, we work hand in hand with international organizations, EU member states, EU financial institutions and international financial institutions, the private sector and civil society, both European and from our partner countries. Cross-cutting priorities of the EU external actions are ensuring the involvement of the civil society, the public and the private sector, the safeguarding of fundamental rights, gender equality and women's empowerment, increasing human capital, and supporting multilateralism and regional integration. To conclude my intervention for now, let me just highlight once again that digital is, along with our response to climate change, the top priority of the EU. Our digital decisions now will impact for decades the economic development, resilience, and security path of both the EU and our partners. EU international cooperation is committed to support partner countries and regions in the transition to a healthy planet and a human-centric digital world. We will also continue strengthening partnerships to deal with the challenges digitalization creates if not used properly. So I think I conclude my intervention for now, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you, Eva. Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me too. I'm going to move across to our next presentation, which is by Ruhiya Seward of the International Development Research Centre, Canada. So Ruhiya, the floor is yours.
Hi, thanks very much, Caitriona. Thanks, Patrick, for the invitation and for the organizers of this. So I've stepped in at the last minute to fill in the shoes of a colleague in Ford who's not well. So, but I'm going to just talk briefly about how what International Development Research Center is and our approach to our work. And I'm going to talk about a couple of specific initiatives. And I mean, actually, I tend to prefer dialogue anyway. So, but just to say, IDRC is part of Canada's international aid envelope. We have an arm distance relationship with the government, but we exist through a parliamentary allocation. But we also work with a lot of external funders around the world. We cooperate and we collaborate with a lot of different kinds of organizations. I mean, in the past, we've worked with Microsoft and Hewlett Foundation, actually, on a think tank initiative. Right now, we're working with the Swedish International Development Agency on an artificial intelligence for development program that's going to be over the next 4 years. But our niche in global development is around research for development, and that is research that feeds into policy and practice. So it's not about research for the sake of it, which is also valuable, but not what we do. Because the idea is that government policymakers everywhere, actually, not just in the global south, but government policymakers and regulators really need a strong evidence base in order to make good decisions. And the hope is, of course, that they do use evidence, but that's something else. But really what's important is neutral, public interest-based research, which is really critical for the ecosystem in countries in the global south. So for the last 50 years, that's what IDRC has been doing, building research to policy capacity and all over the global south. So we have tended to work over longer periods of time with organizations in order to build that capacity to become go-to trusted institutions. So we tend to give longer types of support in order to like foster and facilitate that capacity building and to ensure that these voices are heard in the Global North discussions. In my program area, which is technology and innovation, our aim is to really get out ahead of the curve on disruptive technologies and really unpack the potential and the challenges, and like we're doing with artificial intelligence. But part of how we do that is to work really closely with grantees and partners with whom we've collaborated with over many years, because really they're the ones that know what's happening. And they know the policy opportunities, they know what the governments are asking for. So we work with them, and depending on our own funding pipelines and priorities, we try to really work with grantees and develop research projects together that will support those ecosystems. We also do other things like support capacity building on research communications. We nudge grantees on gender equality as well. Some of the programming we have now and that we have supported over the last few decades, we had a large portfolio of work on open development, open education, open science, open innovation. We work a lot on data issues, from data governance to open data to big data analytics. We have open data hubs all over the global south. We have a large portfolio on gender equality online, feminist internet, feminist open governments, online. Right now, I'm actually working on a project of online gender-based violence, a survey of the global south, because actually we don't have a lot of information about what's happening online to women and to LGBT communities. We've also forged a pretty innovative portfolio of work on digital rights. I think we were some of the first funders to work on privacy online. We also work on connectivity and new access models, but really, as I said, it's really about supporting evidence-based solutions to some of the legal, technical, and security challenges. So from our perspective, cyber policy has a lot of different facets to it, and it's a fairly fragmented space that impacts all of us, all of our governments and all of our private sectors. And there's a lot of competing interests in there, from national security to private sector and to private sector profiteers and hacktivists. And, the norms are a little confusing at times. And I think it raises a lot of technical issues and law enforcement challenges and cross-jurisdictional challenges and trade and diplomacy issues. So, this interlocking challenges of what I might call human rights, online security, or cybersecurity and innovation, what's really needed, from the global south, actually everywhere, but since I focus on the global south, is this locally driven research that can develop a base of evidence that brings together different disciplines and interests from overlapping areas. Because in the global south, which is a broad category, a lot of users and governments are really on the receiving end of what's happening in the global north. And what we need is to see more voices at the table, not only so that they learn and build their own capacity, but also demonstrate their expertise and can be part of the solutions. Because there's a lot of fabulous work getting done, but it's not always known. So this is the foundation of what I'm going to talk briefly about, which is our cyber policy think tank initiative. I talked a little bit about it on Monday, so I'm sorry for anyone who was there if I'm repeating. But it's really about allowing research organizations or supporting research organizations to grapple with the trade-offs in all of these different issue areas, in telecommunications and infrastructure, and economics and innovation, technical issues, social science issues, and to be incubators for new kinds of research and innovation. So one of the grantees that received who won in the call for proposals is Learn Asia in Sri Lanka. And actually right now they've used some of the core funding to research local language on Facebook, to try to categorize language and to understand where, like, hate speech, basically, because right now Facebook doesn't really have a lot of those kinds of tools to know what is going to be hate speech or misinformation. And the idea is that eventually this is going to be able to feed in and help us kind of counter misinformation, which is such a crucial issue right now globally. And also this initiative allows these organizations to network with other organizations in the global south. And then also they support the capacity building of their own policymakers and civil society, because actually, technology is a complex, set of issues, and it's hard to always remain on the frontier of that. And policymakers themselves need sometimes support to understand what's happening. So we're supporting 5 cyber policy centers, 2 in Latin America, 2 in Sub-Saharan Africa, and 1 in Asia. And really, they're pushing their research portfolios into new areas. Some of them are specialists in innovation policy, some of them are specialists on access, and they've really been pushing their research into new territories to kind of grapple with, again, the kind of rights and innovation and security, which is so crucial. And I do feel that I'm seeing expanding influence. Research ICT Africa, who was one of the first recipients, has been working with Patrick on cybersecurity. And our hope at IDRC is that they start to really become more go-to organizations, not only within their own countries, but even from north to south, because their expertise is recognized as offering, very important public interest research, and also to become more sustainable, because as I said at the beginning, research needs to be funded everywhere, and we need that research to be public interest based. So, I think I could talk more about artificial intelligence, but I feel like actually maybe it's good to end there and open it up for dialogue or whatever. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruhiya. That's wonderful. Thank you both, actually. So we now have approximately 10 minutes for a group discussion. I'm not sure. I don't see any questions coming through on the chat. Natalie, have you received any questions? No. Okay. Okay, I see Patrick raising his hand. Patrick, if you'd like to begin the conversation, and please, everyone, be prepared. If you like, your video can be switched on. You can ask questions. Patrick.
Thank you very much, Caitriona, and thank you to the first 2 presenters. Good morning, everyone. I'm kind of abusing the organizer's privilege a bit here, but as you said, everybody has a chance to ask the question. Ruhiya, I was very much interested in your presentation, and first of all, thanks a lot for all the hard work that you guys are doing, because I'm looking at it from the perspective of an organization in the so-called global north who is always interested in finding and identifying the partners in the global south to talk to. And you already mentioned Enrico and the work they're doing in South Africa. But I'm always wondering to what extent these efforts are sustainable in the long term, in the sense that we hear and we kind of provide this instrument for empowerment, or whatever we want to call it, for those think tanks and research institutes in the global south, who rely most of the time on the funders coming from the north, from the developed countries. And I'm wondering what kind of challenges this might create in terms of perception of the work that these organizations are doing as being potentially externally funded, and maybe skewing their political kind of narrative to the wishes of the funders, maybe to some extent. But more importantly, do you see the light in the tunnel when it comes to this kind of work being funded and supported by the governments or private sector, for that matter, in the countries where the organizations are based? And I see also Niels is on the calling. I don't know if he wants to provide the perspective of the other side, of the recipient side, but that would be quite interesting. And I have a quick question for Eva as well. Eva gave us a very big overview of the priorities in the EU's digital policies. I was wondering whether for everybody on the call and those who are going to maybe watch it later, if you could give us an indication of some of the projects that are already being implemented, where there are potential opportunities for research institutes, think tanks, NGOs, and other civil societies organizations to engage, be it in Latin America, Asia, or in other parts of the world more broadly. And thank you very much.
Hi. Well, you've raised a lot of good, juicy issues there. So I'm going to try to address things. I hope I got everything you said. But first of all, the Cyber Policy Center initiative, the way that we structured it was to really respond to what these centers who won the competition wanted to do in their own region. So it wasn't really about being directed from us. I mean, we do a little bit of directive when it comes to, say, gender equality. We've nudged our centers on that. But actually, we really, I mean, to be honest with you, they're the experts, so they know what's going on. And so that's a really important foundational piece of this. But you're right that a lot of research that gets done in the Global South is directed by funders, and we're all guilty of this. And, that was why we wanted to try this, to say, to listen more. But I feel that at IDRC, we're pretty good at listening to the grantees, but I don't know how to get past that, because our funding bases are coming from our own aid budgets, and those aid budgets are tied to political situations, and it's a complex network. But I will say that no matter what, research needs to get funded everywhere. It's not just a Global South issue, right? So there are funding ecosystems in the North that are also at the whim of funding trends, so I feel it's a constant tension, and I feel like it's good to actually have these conversations to talk about that and be really clear. Research has to get funded. And, I feel like IDRC is so important in the global research landscape, in that we have close relationship with grantees. We listen to what's happening. We pay attention to what's going on, and we advocate within our own organizations. I mean, we have our own internal PR that we have to do to say, hey, this is really important. We need to fund this. And our organization is really receptive to that, thankfully. But funding is open to trends, and I don't know, maybe other people here have better answers, but I don't know how to get past the trend. And technology has been at the whim of trends, actually, because it's like some parts of technology are very much the shiny new thing, and everyone wants to throw money at that, and that can also be not so helpful, because for instance, artificial intelligence is not only kind of a frontier thing, but it's built on a number of other issues. So, for instance, connectivity is really crucial for any future for artificial intelligence and data. And yet connectivity is really poor in the global south. I mean, about half the world doesn't access the internet, right? I think I said that on Monday. So, you know, there's bedrock issues too, but things like access and connectivity aren't as sexy as artificial intelligence. So how do you advocate for these issues? And I have only more questions than I have answers, but I don't know if I covered it all, but I'll be quiet now.
That's great, Ruhiya. Thank you. Eva, would you like to respond to some of Patrick's questions?
Yes, Patrick asked me to maybe give a bit more of information on ongoing initiatives of the EU where we are working already on digital and already, let's say, working with think tanks, academia, and supporting research that will make our action stronger. We are in the Service for Foreign Policy Instruments. We are already supporting international digital cooperation, and we are supporting this building of alliances and promoting this European approach, and working with partners in Latin America, in Asia, and more recently in Africa, to try and shape global frameworks in the digital domain. We're mainly working in three digital strands of work: the promotion of international convergence of data protection standards. We want to work with partners in the setting of benchmarks and creating favorable conditions for the data economy to respect privacy and the right the fundamental rights of people. We are strengthening our cooperation to enable convergence on ICT standards. Here again, we are supporting research to begin with, to really identify opportunities to better understand the landscape of ICT standardization in partner countries, and identify opportunities for working with partners to develop these common standards that will lower technical barriers to trade and promote the values of the European standardization system and European standards when this is relevant. And we are also working to build global consensus on how to apply existing international law in cyberspace and develop norms for responsible state behavior that creates cyber stability. And for this, we really work hand in hand with think tanks and academia, and under the lead of EU ISS, Patrick directing this project together with the partner organizations, where we really try to support a evidence-based discussion, evidence-based policy making, and try to develop collective approaches and responses in this domain. We also work in the promotion of a human-centric approach to artificial intelligence. Once again, promoting dialogues that are multi-stakeholder, that include different actors to have a different angles and consider different interests, but always try to develop this human-centered artificial intelligence as European, the European model is promoting internally and wants to promote also at international level. This is for the foreign policy angle. DG DEFCO, Development Cooperation, is also promoting, organizing different initiatives at regional level. We are working on a fair digitalization for all initiative. It wants to be an EU help desk for partner countries, a global center of expertise with regional branches that will serve the EU to fully play this role of supporting the global transition to a fair and inclusive digital age. There's also the Digital for Development Hub, that is being set up, and once again wants to promote a European alliance to build and consolidate the whole of EU approach to promoting these European and international values and mobilizing EU industry, European expertise, and civil society to promote this digital transition globally. So there are a lot of initiatives that are really being developed now and that will hopefully come into place when we have our budget and this new single instrument operational. And that, as I said, always promote this multi-stakeholder approach, working with various actors from Europe and in our partner countries. I hope I addressed the question from Patrick.
Thank you very much, Eva. That's great. And actually, we're doing well on time. So what I'm going to do now is move across to the second segment of the workshop, which is first, we are going to hear from Eli Sugarman of the Hewlett Foundation. Now, Eli cannot be with us in person today. However, he has made great effort in recording his contribution by way of video, which the team will now play for you.
Good morning. Thank you to the conference organizers and the participants for having me. I'm really sorry I can't join you live today, but time differences are a pesky thing. I'm Eli Sugarman. I'm director of the Cyber Initiative at the Hewlett Foundation. I'd like to start by telling you a little bit more about our organization and what kinds of efforts we fund. So the Hewlett Foundation is Silicon Valley based. We're the family foundation of the Hewlett family of Hewlett-Packard. And our cyber initiative is a 10-year, $130 million effort to build a more diverse and robust cyber policy field. We do that through three main funding priorities. The first is we fund core institutions, nonprofits, think tanks that work on cyber policy. Second, we fund a talent pipeline of individuals with a mix of technical and non-technical skills to work throughout government, industry, and the private sector. And third, we fund innovative ways to translate and communicate policy ideas and solutions. What we're really looking for are efforts that get at the real problems and challenges facing society, that weigh the different tensions and trade-offs and democratic values, different notions of security, privacy, economic competitiveness, and the like. We really want people to roll up their sleeves and do the hard work, to really think through those values and tensions and trade-offs, and how you build a field and educate people about these issues. We want to see folks working with government and industry to solve applied problems. We're really focused on how can a field really better society and help solve some pressing problems. Next, let me say a few words about what makes for a good grant application and how we make decisions. So the first thing I would say is it's really important to do your homework about a funder. Every philanthropy and foundation is different. We're meaningfully different than the Ford Foundation. And it's unfortunate that there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach, but everybody has their own process, their own priorities, their own ways they think about the world. And so I think you really need to do your homework to know what a funder is interested in, and you need to show that. You need to show that you've landscaped the community and the field that you're a part of to say, I know that there are 10 other researchers doing something similar. This is how I'm different. This is how I'm perhaps better, why I am the right person or the right team to lead this project now. It's to really explain sort of how you're going to generate that impact. How are you measuring it? You know, who's the target audience? We really want to see that you have a thought process that really links your work to solving a concrete applied problem. And really that you've been thoughtful. And really, again, want to see how you're measuring success so that you can know whether you've succeeded or failed. And everybody fails. That's part of life. But knowing about that to do better the next time is really important. So those are some of the things we like to see in an application. You definitely don't want to send an application and ask questions that you could have learned just from reading the website. We make decisions as a program team. And so I lead that team and we review applications and we make decisions based upon our strategy and our priorities that are all spelled out very clearly on our website. We then make recommendations to the foundation president who approves all grants $1 million US or below. All grants above that go to our board. So generally speaking, we help, the board helps set the framework and the priorities, and then we interpret that and apply it to discrete proposals. We don't use RFPs. We found that we don't have the staff size or the processes to really do that. Instead, we rely on bilateral conversations where you approach us and we talk, or we approach you saying, we've heard about your work, we'd love to learn more. We try to be as transparent as possible though. So every one of our strategy documents is published online. All grants are posted, descriptions of them. We have regular blog posts, newsletters. We try to really be as transparent as possible. We also publish third-party evaluations saying what's working and what's not within our strategies, because again, we know that we need to be held accountable and we want you to see what we're doing. We work on a calendar year budgeting cycle, January 1 to December 31. But again, all of those things are different for every funder, and that's just the way that we tend to operate. So the next question I've been asked to answer is, what are my thoughts on the state of cyber cooperation research? How do you bring more diversity and innovative thinking to these initiatives? And so let me start with diversity of thought and innovative approaches. Don't copy what everyone else is doing. You don't need to chase the shiny object, whether that's AI, disinformation, whatever, just because everyone else is doing that. Honestly, we would much rather you think about something new and creative that is not saturated by work. A problem or an issue that you think is emergent that's really important. We want you to think about incentives that drive behavior, economic incentives and the like. Because odds are, if you're thinking about a problem and a solution, somebody else may have had similar thoughts. And there's a reason why their solutions and ideas have not been embraced or adopted. Oftentimes, the hardest part is not coming up with a good idea. It's understanding why it's not being used or why others won't run with it, and then helping to build that into the proposal and the solutions that you're coming up with. We also love to see creative partnerships. If you're a think tank, partner with a university, or partner with a company to get data, or with the state and local government who can help you prototype and try something out at a more manageable scale before you go to a nationwide or regional level effort. So we love to see those things, the partnerships, the prototyping, going to scale. Those are all things that we really like to see and that we think are innovative. Because again, we don't just want you doing the same old work that everybody's doing, even if it really is still important, push yourself. We also feel strongly that we need to bring new voices to the field, a new perspective, and the diversity of peoples in particular. And we are working to do that through a variety of means that we're going to be writing more about and sharing about. But we know we need to do better and are always open to ideas and critiques about what we could do more there. The last thing I would say is sort of information about, the impact of projects that we fund. How do we think about that and closing some of the gaps that this conference is focused on? So I would say, for starters, we have a robust monitoring and evaluation methodology. And so we gather data on an annual basis. We also commission third-party deep dive looks to really assess what's working and what's not. We have implementation markers that are sort of updated yearly that are directional guides to know that if we see this development or this trend, it means we're moving in the right direction or not. Some things are easier to measure than others, right? It's easier to measure how mature the university programs are that we're funding. Do they have a mix of political science, law, business, psychology, all the relevant disciplines or not? It's also easier to measure where students are going. Is it a mix of government, private sector, and civil society, or is it too skewed towards one of those sectors? But then other things are really hard to measure, right? Like policy impact. How do you measure the impact of an innovative policy idea or solution? It's actually, you've got to rely on qualitative data. You need to interview the people who are in the room who helped make the decision, because we all like to feel like we were the ones who drove a decision to be made. But unless your last name is Schrems, you probably can't always take as much credit as you would want to for certain policy outcomes. We also need better information, right? And one of the areas we need better information about is diversity in the field or the lack thereof. Because we do have demographic data about our grantee community, and it shows some really major gaps that we need to do better to close, especially when it comes to organizations led by and predominantly staffed by people of color. The field needs to do better as a whole. And so one effort we're considering is, do we need to engage in some data gathering and research to create a better understanding of the diversity or lack thereof in the field, so everybody has a baseline that they can measure whether they're succeeding and where they're failing. Again, sorry that I'm not with you today. Those were some brief remarks. I'm always happy to talk. Please feel free to contact me offline. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Twitter, and the conference organizers have my contact information they can share. Stay safe and healthy.
Intervention from Eli. It's a shame that we couldn't thank him in person, but really just a lot of food for thought there. So that's great. So with that, I'm going to, I see Rachael has her video on. We're going to hear from Rachael Falk, who is with the Australian Cybersecurity Cooperative Research Centre. So Rachael, I'll pass the floor to you and ask you to switch on your mic. Thanks.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me here today. Well, tonight I'm actually here in Australia, where it's 7:30 tonight in the evening. It's dark outside and it's winter. So a very different part of the world. It's wonderful to be here, and also very interesting to hear all the different approaches to funding and the different approaches to cybersecurity research. Just a little bit about the Cybersecurity Cooperative Research Centre and cooperative research centres generally. They were an initiative in 1990, so it's a bipartisan approach, actually by the other side of politics to the current government of the day. And they were established as a means of government becoming invested in research that was considered to also be driven by industry and interested participants. So what we are is we're a public company, limited by guarantee. We're not a Commonwealth agency. We get $50 million worth of Australian funding from the Australian government. But alongside that, we have 24 participants. Everyone pays to join. We have federal government agencies, state governments, small business and large business as active participants in our CRCs. Included in that are 6 universities and 1 research organisation called Data 61, which is an Australian Commonwealth research organisation. Together, all our participants form a formal part of our research centre. They sign an agreement, which means they, generally speaking, contribute money and in kind. And just for a bit of context, cooperative research centres, where I think there are 23 at the moment that are active, they usually run for 5 to 7 years, can be longer. At the moment, it's 7 years. They traditionally were in areas where there had not been a lot of research money, bushfires, feral pests, milk, bees, because the idea being that there was often a strong community of goodwill to find solutions to research problems, but often not a lot of focus. It's very different in cybersecurity. It's a very noisy environment. So a lot of my participants equally so could be my competitors. We have very big organisations that themselves have R&D departments that also do research into the areas we're researching. But we come together and we're industry-led. So a bit like what Eli Sugarman was saying, we want to solve industry-led but complex problems. As one of my directors put it at a board meeting the other day, we should be seeing a lot of our research problems on the front page of a newspaper, because we want to be solving complex challenges. So we do that by mainly with our universities, our 6 universities and Data 61. We obviously give project grants, and we the parties come together and agree a project idea that is settled by our research director. We also put in Commonwealth funding, and it's fueled by really funding the universities through scholars and postdocs to fuel that back-end academic research, and contributing to that are also our government or our private sector participants who will contribute their expertise and guidance in a problem. We are very much about building collaboration. Alongside that, we have 3 research programs, or 2 research programs actually. The first one is critical infrastructure, and that's anything and everything that goes with critical infrastructure. It could be finding ways through machine learning to do something better. It could be looking at global supply chain. And the other area is what we call cybersecurity as a service, which is kind of an odd name. It's looking at solutions, tools and outcomes for small business, and things that can be fashioned used for small business more broadly. It's a funny kind of name, but it has a broad remit. Tucked within that is law and policy. When I joined as the inaugural CEO, I am a former lawyer. I'm not a STEM-based person. We had 8 research themes, all of which were, to be honest, bits and bytes. And it struck me that you can't have good overall holistic view of cybersecurity without some law and policy and regulation. And we look at problems around unintended consequences, potentially of legislation. We look at complex or challenging ideas like the hacking back. We are also looking at narratives around how do you introduce maybe some controversial how you might look at controversial legislation and how that could be translated into better understanding by civil society. Interestingly, some of our participants, the newer ones who have joined our existing ones, have really welcomed the addition of law and policy. It's also opened up an area for our existing universities, and their law faculties or their criminology faculties have been open to also being engaged in our Cooperative Research Centre. We also believe in building Australia's cybersecurity capability. So that means a next generation of not just cyber academics, but cyber professionals, because some of our, as you know, some academics won't pursue careers in academia, but they're trained at the honours level, mostly honours or PhDs. We're seeing not so much uptake for masters. At the moment in Australia, my stats, according to my handy briefing notes, it's medical and health sciences that seem to get quite a lot of funding, well, based on 2018 figures. They got 28.4% of research funding, and that was followed by engineering at 10.2%. And all other fields of research, which comprise 20 other fields of research, receive less than 10% of total expenditure. I should add some context there. Really in the last month, the Australian government has released a lot of initiatives around funding more STEM-based, either STEM-based places at universities or STEM-based research. So that may be skewed. But what it means, and I'm sure this is the same for everyone listening to this right now, is every research dollar is hard fought at the moment. And I'm acutely aware of that every Commonwealth dollar that I spend on research, both in my operating costs and research, is really one that we need to think carefully about. So we are very careful about our projects and what we invest in. And importantly, we've got to make that pot of 50 million Australian Commonwealth dollars last a distance of 7 years, irrespective of kind of what participants come and go. So we're very conscious of that. We collaborate with international partners. We're yet to do a formal collaboration, but we look, our research director is German, but came from a UK university. We're constantly looking for areas where we can collaborate offshore, if it's with postdocs coming on board or it's research projects that might be interesting. We always have the door open to do that, because I think, as others have mentioned, collaboration and diversity, both in academic thinking, solving a problem, gender, and just being from a different part of the world, is really, really vital, especially because a problem we may not have been able to solve for whatever reason could be something that some other institution has been able to solve or has managed through the problems relatively easily at the same time. We believe in being quite frank and fearless. So the research part of the organisation is really run by the research director. I might have a right of veto on the odd occasion. I don't think it's happened yet, but the research director sets the tone, and that's left really separate from me. I probably have a little bit more to do with law and policy because of my professional background, and that means that we, in Australia, which is obviously a bit of a smaller country compared to the EU or the UK, we're able to do other ways to shape and influence and build our reputation by way of public commentary. It might be an op-ed, it could be appearance at panels, and all sorts of other ways. We're very committed, and it's very hard in research, as we all know, to measure what success looks like in research, but we're very committed to thinking about what our legacy will be, not just the number of honours or the number of PhD graduates. And we have very hard targets set by the Commonwealth for not just how many graduates, but how many papers, tools and outcomes. Every project we do is matched to a Commonwealth deliverable. So we live and die by exactly what milestones we reach, which we have to report on a quarterly basis. But at a broader sort of level, I'm really committed to thinking about how we will leave at the end of our 7 years, not just being a research institution that might have had 44 PhD graduates or had 150 papers, but also making sure that for Australians too, we have changed how they have understood cybersecurity, and we've really hopefully created something, a tool or an outcome or a project that has really made a difference at a government level, at a civil society level, and at a business level. We are a bit like Eli, we welcome feedback. We live in a feedback-rich environment with 24 participants. We try and meet with them regularly through either the research director or me. We do take feedback. Our universities at the moment are really really, I think, coming under a lot of pressure. So we want to try and make our CRC also work for the universities to ensure that they're fully immersed where they can be. So we've got lots of different participants and constituents, but it makes for a very interesting space when it comes to, a bit like what Eli said, seeking out innovative problems in a space that's incredibly noisy. I think, as Ruhiya said, AI can be the next big thing. Blockchain kind of was a thing for a while. I think it's died down. Machine learning. There's lots of buzzwords that come across our desk every week, and it's learning, in a sense, to almost gold pan through those to work out where really should our investment be with our current academic capability through the great universities we work with, but also where we think as an organisation we should be wisely spending Commonwealth dollars, but at the same time helping our participants achieve their research goals. So we are, like to say, unique in some ways, but in lots of ways there's probably lots of similar organisations around the world, but we, like everyone, I think, want to leave the world a better place in terms of projects, capacity, gender, in terms of raising awareness around the need for more women in STEM, and hopefully leaving, I think, having built some tools and capability by 2024.
Great, that's wonderful. Thank you very much, Rachael. So I see we have 10 to 15 minutes left, and I see that there has already been a little bit of chat in the chat function. So if Joe Burton can hear me, Joe had posed a question earlier on, which I think all of our speakers today could provide some input on. Joe, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Lovely. Yeah, Joe, it would be great to hear your question, if you don't mind.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to ask a question, and it's been a really interesting panel. I'm currently a Marie Curie fellowship on a Marie Curie fellowship in Brussels. So I'm currently implementing a 2-year European-funded research project. I'm sort of probably a late early career researcher, and I just wanted to ask, it's really quite difficult as an early career researcher to get your head around the funding mechanisms, the terminology, the processes, the portals, etc. And I sometimes feel that funding organizations maybe could do a little bit more hand holding, to use that expression, of early career researchers to help them and be proactive in helping them develop their research. Thankfully, I had some good support from the university where I'm based. But so I just wanted to ask about that. What are your plans as funders to really help get these early career researchers who have, I think, really good ideas, to get them through the pipeline and get their projects funded? And I just wanted to cheekily say as well that I'm sort of looking to develop a funding application on AI and information warfare. I know that they are buzzwords, but if anyone is interested in talking to me about that at some point offline, that would be great too. So thanks for all your great contributions, and this has been another wonderful panel. Cheers.
Nice try, Joe.
Well, this is the purpose of the panel, surely,
yes,
right?
yeah, no, that's
Connect
great.
researchers with the funders. So
Yeah.
I'm happy to be cheeky in this context, right?
Well done. No, it's a great question though, in terms of early career researchers as well. I'd love to hear. Shall we start? Ruhiya, I don't know if you have any thoughts on this. I might start in that order, if that works for you.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I actually feel like Eli gave a really nice response to that, because, you know, it is about sort of doing, I mean, it's, of course, funding applications are a lot of work, and it just requires like doing a lot of research on what a funder is interested in. You know, in the case of IDRC, we work with the Global South, so that's a primary thing. But, you know, we tend to work in interesting ways. I mean, sometimes we do call for proposals. You know, our proposals are not that complicated, I don't think, but, you know, but that's one way. So big calls for proposals, but we also work with like a network modality where we'll work with a hub on a particular subject. Like I can give this example for the Privacy and Development Network that we worked on like almost 10 years ago. is a network hub based with Privacy International in London, and then they sub-granted to to grantees all over the global south. And so that process itself is much less complicated through that sub-grantee model. And then through that process, there's a lot of capacity building that goes on. IDRC also takes on summer interns and summer researchers, and we do have a PhD funding initiative. It's not in my program area, but it is for PhD researchers from the global south in Canada. So there's a range of things. I mean, I don't know if I could say anything more eloquent than what Eli said from Hewlett. It's like it does require a certain level of just sorting it out, like what a funder is interested in. It's the best way, and to establish relationships. That is part of it, inevitably. I mean, it's building relationships. So I meet people at conferences all the time, and if they have good ideas, we develop a relationship over time. And if they, but the organization, at least for IDRC, the organization has to have very, it has to have good accounting procedures. It has to have, it has to be authorized by the government. So there's a lot of complicated things for Global South research. So I'm going to stop there or just keep talking.
Thanks very much, Ruhiya. Ava, I don't know if you have any thoughts, or Rachael, feel free to jump in.
I think that's right. I think the knowing where to go in each jurisdiction is really important. In Australia, it's about certainly knowing the grant-giving bodies, the Commonwealth bodies, and the various funds. But exactly like Eli said, I think, and Hewlett Foundation's an interesting one. They make it really clear about what their projects are and how you apply. Similarly, I can sort of tell you, I routinely get emails that are, from all sorts of students wanting PhD scholarships. We don't kind of work that way. You would need to look at our website, although it's under construction at the moment. But yeah, I can't stress enough doing your homework, looking at the scholarships at various universities, which you probably already do, but connections are everything. But perhaps also trying to work out where research directors fit and whether you can talk to them and organisations or somebody who has program leads, because they will be able to tell you where the grants are and where the pockets can be found. I'm not sure about the situation in Europe as much, but in Australia, I expect at the moment, while there's been a big push for funding and certain scholarships, that will inevitably dry up, or the concern may be that it'll be more challenging for people to even come here. Certainly at the moment, you can't come here unless you want to do, well, in fact, no international students can come. But it's certainly worthwhile taking the time at the moment while we're all stuck at home or in the office and unable to travel, to work out where the grants might be in the future and what you're most interested in doing.
Thank you, Rachael. Ava, if you have any thoughts?
Yeah. Do you hear me?
Yes, perfectly. Yeah.
Yes. Well, just to mention, I briefly referred to this. The EU supports projects in the form of, by providing funding in the form of grants or contracts, budget support to our partner countries directly. In the case of grants, a grant is awarded based on a proposal made by an applicant to the Commission. And this, of course, is usually in the frame of a call for proposals, where we will publish the guidelines for applicants, establishing the context, the objectives, and the eligibility criteria, both in terms of actors that can apply, of actions, and the costs that would be eligible. As it has been said by other intervenants, there are certain evaluation criteria. First of all, the relevance of the action, how relevant the proposal that is submitted is to the objectives and priorities of the specific call for proposals and the specific theme that it wants to address. Also the design of the action, how it is designed, how it has an action plan that will ensure achieving the expected results, the actors that are involved, the activities, whether these are feasible and consistent in relation with the expected results. And then another set of criteria, I think they were all mentioned before also by the other participants or speakers, the financial and operational capacity of the applicants is also considered, the implementation approach and the sustainability of the action. Among the things of the design of the action, it includes the indicators that are proposed to measure progress in the achievement of those results. And in the case of foreign policy actions, these indicators will mostly focus on what are the strategies that are being supported, what are the processes, approaches that are being supported. If it's development cooperation, they will be more focused on the capacities that are developed, the people that are being able to benefit from the action. So these are all the criteria that are taken into consideration to evaluate. I would also the way to know more is, first of all, to check the programming documents to see what will be the priority sectors and the actions that will be supported in different regarding different countries, different regions, or at global level. And then check the international cooperation websites where all the call for proposals and tenders are published, and the application is basically or mainly done online. Sometimes it's not easy to apply or to follow all these criteria and guidelines and instructions, but everything is published online and should be accessible by everyone interested.
Thank you very much, Eva. Patrick, can you hear me? Yeah. Niels, you were making some very interesting comments with respect to Ruhiya's intervention.
Yeah, Caitriona, I think I don't know if anyone can hear me, but I think your sound is coming off a little bit on my side, at least. But I think I know what you said, and first of all, thank you to the panelists. It's really interesting to get the rare opportunity to hear about funding from the supply side. Can everyone hear me? Yeah. Just to briefly respond to Patrick's question and the discussion here, I want to say in regards to the danger of influencing research through funding, particularly in these north to south, funder to donor relationships, what I think I really want to stress that funders can do is take the long-term view and the sort of flexibility that allows. So when funding research from across an ocean, it's really important to give local organizations the trust and flexibility to operate in their own regional context and expertise. A challenge for us as an organization, I think, has always been to sort of respond to these new trends, as you say, and having to go where the funding is always the challenge. So just like you say, Ruhiya, traditional challenges of access and use, which is sort of the bedrock of the RIA project, is not always as easy to sell as artificial intelligence, despite what maybe local ICT development is like in South Africa. So that's where IDRC's ongoing support structures, multi-year dialogue, and keeping that sort of distance by allowing a lot of time is really, really important.
Great. I don't know if Ruhiya wants to come back on that.
No, I mean, it's perfectly, it's nice. Thank you. I'm glad.
Great. Patrick, I see you raising your hand there.
Yes, I have one very quick comment, observation, maybe to some extent also a frustration. I don't know whether it also happens on your side, but I was very intrigued with what Rachael said about your boss is saying that, we have to do research or fund research that's on the front pages of newspapers, which I think is quite unusual, or maybe from the research perspective, you will look at those questions with a completely different time frame, right? So those who work at the universities, I think think tanks have it slightly easier because they have this flexibility sometimes to adapt and basically jump on the topic that's maybe more policy sensitive than others. But I would definitely sympathize with frustration of colleagues academics who would say, I cannot really plan the work of my department or the university trying to anticipate what is going to be on the agenda. So there is, and it also came through in the presentations, Eli's presentation, about thinking of impact. And I'm just wondering, to some extent, I see it as a two-way problem. On one hand, it's this issue of a time frame that's different on the researcher side and also on the funding institution side. But at the same time, I also kind of come to the conclusion, listening to your presentations, that actually how we as researchers or research community are constructed is not always really fitting to the modern world, in the sense that, even listening to Eva think about indicators, think about how to present your research in terms of impact. It's not always how we think about problems. Most of the proposals probably that you get are constructed as, these are the outputs we're going to give you. It's going to be 5 studies, 10 workshops, and 15 training sessions, without necessarily really thinking about the impact that we want to have. Whereas it seems to me that the donors are increasingly really looking for this impact question. So what, right? Where is it that you're going to get us? What is the real problem that you're going to address? And to some extent, I absolutely sympathize with that approach. But at the same time, I'm kind of feeling a bit hopeless and powerless, knowing that there are so many people out there who are actually not really trained or prepared to be confronted with that reality, which then probably results in the grant application rejections and so on. And I don't know if you have any tips on how to maybe overcome that, not necessarily, on your side, on the researcher's side, but maybe whether there's a sort of a more structural underlying problem that we should be thinking of addressing in order to kind of bridge this gap between the funders and those applying for funding. Because both have reasonable expectations, except that there's really no way for the system to change unless we address those structural problems. Thank you.
I'm happy to just provide a quick answer to some of that. I should add that even though it might have been mentioned in the board meeting, that kind of research on the front pages, my research director, who is an academic with a very good commercial mind, wasn't exactly of the same mind, so that won't be surprising. I totally agree with you, though, that there is an inherent tension between academia sometimes and research output, because we live in the world of a news cycle or quick turnaround. And so I'm constantly talking about that we need to understand that there is a role and a place for long-term research. And just because the world's sped up, particularly in cybersecurity, it's a very noisy, busy, fast pace. We should remember that there is always time for research, and we have to make that time. I commented recently at an event that it reminds me of that Phil Collins song, "You can't hurry love, you can't hurry good research." But what my role is a little bit, because you need to also serve, in some ways, impact can be 2 ways. You can have your long-term research impacts that you have to document, but you also have your shorter-term ones that you should be able to break down into bite-sized chunks that you can share with either your board or your donors or your wider community, so that you're starting to break down some of that research into bite-sized chunks that are what I call explain to grandma. I make every academic who comes and talks to me about their fantastic new project, I say, that's great, but if you're at your grandmother's house for Sunday lunch, Tell me what you're going to say to grandma about your research. And that makes everyone think. And I know I don't mean in any way to degrade worthy research, but what I mean is today we have to be able to do that research translation piece to have impact. Otherwise, eyes glaze over very quickly at a funding level, a board level, and a society level. And I certainly don't mean to detract in any way from the fantastic research. I'm really committed to that research translation, and personally and professionally, and that's explain it to grandma so that when that brilliant long-term research piece comes off, we've already conditioned everyone to know it's coming, and this is the great pace it is. But I do firmly believe that that there has to be room to let the researchers research, but the academics also have to understand that they need to be able to explain it to grandma at Sunday lunch.
That's a really great intervention to end on, and a great question, Patrick. Thank you for that. I'm conscious of everyone's time, particularly when our speakers have come in, joined us from different time zones. So with that, I want to very much publicly thank Natalie and Patrick, of course, for all the great work and for organising this. I've certainly taken away a lot from this whole conversation, and I'm sure our participants have too. So I guess we can't clap, it's not the norm on Zoom, but just to say thank you everybody, and I hope we can all meet again in person in the near future. So thank you all.